Welcome to the Tuesday review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by James and Callum. How you going, guys?
Hello,
Yeah, not
greetings from Middle Earth.
Greetings from Middle Earth. We are on our third week of our Lord of the Rings trilogy and franchise discussion, talking everything Lord of the Rings. This week with a focal point on Return of the King.
The big boy.
Just a couple of little housekeeping notes before we begin.
Mm-hmm.
I apologise for last week's late podcast upload, because the ring's not the only thing that needs to get thrown into Mount Doom. So does our podcast host Chat Engine.
I think I've rambled on long enough on this show about how hard it is to edit and upload the show and how I'm so busy with work and Nathan's had to take over. So
I didn't realize what you meant by problems editing and uploading is just the upload button does nothing.
The uploading part is a big part of
yeah, that's a big part of the frustration. When you upload and you're like 100%, it just does nothing.
But better late than never.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
Anyway,
live
and learn.
This week, Return of the King, the big chonkers epic finale, the one that won all the Academy Awards, the one everyone loves, the one everyone talks about.
The nerds should love them all equally.
That's actually something we'll talk about later, how it's like my opinions have changed over the years.
Having just watched 3 of them over 3 weeks in succession, I don't think I could say that I love one more than the other, really. Taken as a whole.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it on one of the other reviews where they each offer something important to the trilogy.
Yeah.
Where Fellowship sets everything up, establishes the characters and the world. Two Towers kind of sets the stakes. It shows what the war actually is and what it means for the people in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And Return of the King, as we'll talk about, resolves the arcs and delivers all the payoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why it's a perfect trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, and as it was written, it's written as one book, but split into 3.
And you need each of the ingredients
filmed
to make the perfect
one movie.
pie.
Yeah. And that's a thing which we've reiterated a lot. It takes a lot to make a bad movie. People will work so hard to make a bad movie, and when a movie's great, it's like every little piece has to fall in place perfectly, And so for this trilogy to have worked the way it did,
once in a lifetime.
Yeah, it's just every little piece had to fall into place, and it did, and it's a truly amazing thing. One thing I really want to quickly talk about is the color of the movie, because we talked about how great it looks and the set design, the costume, and we were just talking off air about things we always talk about on air, but and how modern B movies, even big budget movies, they just don't look good anymore. Your standard Steven Seagal.
Yeah, for context, we were discussing Disney Plus on Star now has Marked for Death with Steven Seagal. Why? Because they can, I guess.
And they're right.
And I don't know if it's Star or it's because the movie,
it would have been a Fox.
It would have been a
like
Fox
all
movie.
treasures, it has been faithfully restored. So those of us who love Steven Seagal continue to enjoy his works.
But that's the thing. Even crappy action movies or B movies from the 80s and 90s, it's like they just looked better. They were filmed on film. The lighting's better. They were shot in locations or on sets. Had this cool smoky atmosphere. Even the bad ones still have something.
It's still fun to look at.
I suppose when you're using film, you kind of you can do after the post-production work.
Yeah.
You could still do stuff in post, but you can't do all the modern trickery that people do now.
I think now movies, it's because all the green screen and the digital cameras are so cheap and easy to use. It's especially with B movies, but even with bigger budget movies, it's they just don't look that good anymore. They look kind of flat and ugly. And oftentimes, which is what I wanted to talk about, oftentimes a lot of modern movies, they have this grey, brown, ugly, flat, dull look to them. And it's a deliberate choice, to make things look cool and gritty. Even the big fantasy movies. I was thinking of that crappy Clash of the Titans movie that came out about 5-10 years ago. No one saw, and it was crap. But it's that's a big epic fantasy movie with crazy stuff
and
going.
It all
on.
looks the same.
It was all brown and grey, and in contrast, you get the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which, as we discussed, looks so amazing,
vibrant,
and
there's
was
colors. Yeah, even in dark scenes, there's still like there's a blue,
exactly,
or there's a color.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like these movies came out just at the end, you know, the early 2000s, just at the end of like things. Digital photography was still new, but some films were starting to use that. CGI was a thing, but you know, a lot more films are starting. So Lord of the Rings is really that end point of like a really good looking shot on film, mostly practical. Obviously, like as we said last week, lots of CGI, still lots of green screen, but shot.
They did as much as they could.
Exactly, the sets, the lighting, just it looks so nice, and the color. Like we were watching it on the projector, you know, the 4K, restoration, and just. There was the bit at the start where you show Gollum's origin story or backstory,
and the grass.
Yeah, and Callum was like, "Wow, the grass! It was so green."
And keep in mind, right, the 4K versions of the films, which are the ones we're talking about in our reviews, they were mastered for use with Dolby Vision.
Yeah, which we don't have.
Which we don't even have.
Yeah.
So we're watching
you can imagine
in a substandard way, still 4K, but we don't have the extra pop that you're supposed to have.
If you had a $50,000 setup,
it'll look even better if that's it is possible.
Or a reasonably cheap TV that has Dolby Vision.
Well, as long as you got the Dolby Vision.
So we're exclaiming about how wonderful it looks when that's not even the best it can look.
And like, because the theatrical versions on Blu-ray that came out 10 or so years ago, they were a bit more vibrant in color, and then the extended versions on Blu-ray they changed the color grading a bit. It's a bit more muted, and the new 4K version, which we watch, is kind of in between. Peter Jackson kind of tried to make all the Hobbit movies and all the Lord of the Rings movies have a uniform kind of look to it, which I don't agree with, and is the most closest to the George Lucasing as he got. It's not a huge deal breaker, and I think if he really wanted, he should have made the Hobbit movies look like the Lord of the Rings movies and not tried to make them all look the same. But even then, like, the movie still looks fantastic, and the color is still really vibrant and pops out. And you know, like as we discussed, like the movies now, even the big colorful Marvel movies, they just kind of look flat and boring. It doesn't have that vibrancy that like old 80s fantasy
I'm
movies,
thinking about
sci-fi movies have.
I'm thinking about some of the big action scenes from Endgame and Infinity War, and there is a lot of dark, like there's a lot of grey.
Yeah, there's a lot of browns, and like it does, like there's
you do get scenes of color. Yeah, but like some of the big action pieces, they are very kind of,
because of the CGI and the green screen and the digital photography and the way they light it, and they have to do the effects and that, it all kind of layers, and it kind of just becomes flat and dull.
Yeah, even Thor: Love and Thunder. What's the
Ragnarok?
Ragnarok. That's the one they tried to make the most colorful, the most sort of
it pops,
80s metal, like colorful, extreme.
And even then,
it still looks a bit flat because all the CG they use, all the tech in it.
Yeah, it's the way they photograph things now. It's just not the same.
Even that had the most color of pretty much all the Marvel movies, and it still looked kind of the same.
Doesn't have the depth of like... No.
And, Marked for Death, Steven Seagal, whatever it is called.
Looks very nice.
Nice. Movies like that just look better.
It shouldn't.
Yeah, when everything was just smoky and neon, and it's like, cool. It's just like, but the Lord of the Rings movies do... Just
they look good.
They just pop, and they look so nice. And even with the 20-year-old CGI and green screen, there was never a moment where I was like, "Oh, this is really aged poorly."
It's because you've got that separation of there's still a lot of practical stuff and CG. Where nowadays it's all just pretty much CG.
We talked about
with a little practical.
Yeah, we talked about it last week where it's because Lord of the Rings skews to the mostly practical, whereas most movies now skew to the kind of mostly CG.
We're kind of lucky that Lord of the Rings is such a Middle Ages kind of story, because the costumes are complicated to make, but visually they look very simple in terms of the hobbits. I guess so. Relatively simple clothing that you don't need to CG augment Do you know what I mean? Like on the scale that they would for, say, an Avengers movie.
But we talked about this off air about Cyborg in the Justice League. How the CGI looks terrible. It was always going to look terrible. It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. It looks like one of the when you get a graphics card and it has the example on the box. You know. But it's like, it doesn't matter how much money and time they spend on it. It always ends up looking that way because they have so much other CGI to do. Whereas we were like, if you did it practically, it might be a bit bulky or whatever. But as we discussed, it'll age better. And also, as we discussed before, if you do a combination of both, it ends up looking better. So if you pad the actor a bit and make a few, but then you leave some room for CG, so he's got joints so he can do stunts and move.
The stuff on Cyborg's face could have been practical.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah. For instance, that's something that where you're focusing on a lot. It could have just been...
And this is another thing. Anyway, we don't have a lot of time.
Back to Lord of the Rings.
One thing really quickly. When you do a close-up of something, that's when you do the practical version. When you're doing a long shot, that's when you do the CG version. This is what Lord of the Rings does. This is what many great sci-fi fantasy films do. Now, everything's CGI. So they do a super close-up, looks like terrible CGI. And it's like, well, you could have made a practical just for that, just for those close-ups. That's what that's how you make movies. You have a close-up thing. You have a rubber gun for stunts. You have a blank firing gun for when you need to shoot. Like, it's not always the same gun, you know. Like it's movies are fake. Everyone, it's a trick. Like you have to make. The actor will have one T-shirt to get ripped, and then 20 other T-shirts that have slightly different alterations of rips, and then one with a little bit of blood, one with more. Like that's.
I think I see like movies these days at standard they cost $100 million to make, and however much of that goes to CG. I feel like, you know what? If these film directors from the classic age, 1930s, 1940s, if someone gave them $100 million to make a movie,
my God,
they would explode.
They'd explode, or we
get the best movie. Yeah,
or we'd get a Ben-Hur every other week, or or we'd get a Gone with the Wind every other week. Whereas now you get these $100 million movies. It's like, where did that money go? Yeah, you watch Lord of the Rings, every penny is on screen.
Yeah.
So rambling on again as we do. We should call this the Tuesday Ramble.
No, but the larger point is that we're lucky that the films were made when they were made, because now we have this practicality to the film that you don't get in more modern movies.
It came out right at the right time of you had CGI to do the stuff that was good enough to do the stuff that you couldn't do practically, but mostly practical, and you had a director who at the time knew how to combine those elements and knew how to focus.
Because especially like I said, the costume design, they did the best they could to make convincing costumes with what they had, because they had the ability to make simple costumes look convincing.
Yeah, but even though the Rohan armor, which is so intricate and ornate, is just beautiful.
It's all like actually made.
Yeah,
as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, no, it is, and even the orc armor. We see a lot of close-ups of the orcs as the movies go on, and the orc armor is so intricate, and there's just little bits and pieces and scratches, and it's so cool and
detailed.
It's just there's so much going on. You can watch this movie over and over again and just pause it and look at a different thing and go look at a different corner of the frame and go, wow.
Appreciate whatever.
The only thing I can think of, was it possible that they CG'd some of the horse armor? Or would they have attached?
They would have attached it. Maybe for some of the longer shots.
Keep in mind,
but
maybe when the horses got kicked by the elephants, maybe that was CG'd.
Oh yeah, no, the elephants were real. We established that. Peter Jackson
but
shipped them in.
Also, keep in mind with movie magic, a lot of that horse armor might have been incredibly light.
Oh yeah, that's the thing.
Like
the horse armor
it won't be as heavy as
the chain. The chainmail is not real.
They weren't wearing real chainmail.
Gimli's not real.
Oh, these movies suck.
That's not a real act.
Yeah.
Even just like, when they do close-ups of the ring, that's like actually a really big ring, like the size of a pizza or something, like it's a really...
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, like, so that's just movie magic, and these movies just...
I wonder where the ring is right now.
that giant
house.
one?
Yeah. In a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah.
In one of those Indiana Jones boxes, like in the warehouse.
Well, I mean, we got so much to talk about. What should we talk about?
Well, I suppose
Smeagol. We
should start from the start.
Yeah, well, let's start from
the movie opens with.
Let's start with Smeagol's
origin. Yeah,
because we had some issues with it.
Yeah, so like, obviously we learn in the first two movies that Gollum at some point was a hobbit or hobbit-like creature,
and we were kind of surprised to learn that this in the books. This actually is told in Fellowship of the Ring, which we all thought it would have been told in Two Towers.
Well, that actually, when I was talking about the adaptation last week, and it's like a lot of stuff happens in Fellowship that Peter Jackson moved to Return of the King, so it's more of like a...
It makes more sense for a film.
Like an epic reveal or something, and makes more sense for the movie. And of course, as we discussed, there are book purists who are like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, we were actually surprised to find out there's a fair few people who think the movies suck.
But as we discussed, when you're making a movie, you have to make change sort of thing. And in that case, like I think he did a pretty good job.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we see at the start of Return of the King, like the cold open, if you can call it that, we see Gollum in his original Hobbit form, Smeagol.
Yeah, with his cousin
Deagle. Yeah, and they're fishing because we learned that Gollum or Smeagol was one of the river folk. And he's a hobbit, and they're fishing, and the cousin falls in, finds the ring, and Smeagol gets overcome he obsessed with having the ring,
like a lust.
Yeah. And
it's my birthday, give us a precious...
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah,
and he
blah.
kills his cousin over it. And it's a great opening scene, and I still remember seeing it for the first time in the cinema when I was younger. And, just incredible. And then you see the montage of the transformation over I'm assuming hundreds of years of him slowly becoming more emaciated and sickly and his hair falling out.
The degeneration.
Yeah, and then finally he becomes Gollum. And it's great, except we all had the same problem, which is Andy Serkis, who plays Smeagol Gollum, and who plays his human hobbit form, is still doing the squeaky
the voice
Gollum
doesn't change,
voice.
Yeah. But I guess that the idea was maybe Peter Jackson was like, maybe people won't connect those dots unless I give him the exact same
that's
voice.
What we're thinking is, were they just thinking that people were dumb?
That's the audience's dumb reaction.
Yeah, but
the studio reaction.
My other problem is that they make Andy Serkis look kind of pale and sickly even as a normal hobbit.
Yeah.
And I don't like that idea.
He should have been healthy.
He should have been a healthy, kind of round in the face. I know Andy Serkis is quite a thin-faced guy, but he should have been very red-cheeked, like all the other hobbits.
Yeah,
all the other hobbits. Yeah. He should have been a very normal hobbit who is slowly corrupted by the ring and becomes that creature.
Including the voice,
especially, and because they have that montage, you see him slowly becoming Gollum. He's coughing and he's all... the color leaves his face.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for them to show his normal voice becoming more squeaky. And
we want to see the corruption from start to finish. Yeah. We don't... I guarantee you it's a studio executive being like, but how audience is going to know it's the same character? And Peter Jackson just being like, well, what do you want me to do about it?
That might be part of it, but I think it was also just a bad stylistic choice because, like I said, why would they make his voice and he look
because audience
creepy
is
at
dumb,
the same
It's interesting,
time,
right? But it's because this is like the only fault of the trilogy.
I mean, that's the thing is watching Return of the King, there's only a couple of moments where I was like... Because all the other movies we were almost 100% fine with.
Yeah.
And then Return of the King, I think it's this moment, and there might be one other moment I had a problem with later in the movie, I can't remember, that we had problems with. And it's so frustrating because Return of the King is so amazing.
Yeah, the only other issue is the exclusion of the Sauron scene. And the Sauron death scene.
Oh, Saruman's death. Yeah,
and,
which I really
Saruman,
want to talk about.
And the exclusion of the voice.
Oh, the mouth of Sauron.
Which we'll get to later when we talk about some of the excluded features.
There's a lot of stuff in Return of the King...
Which should have been there.
But that I understand why they cut out. But there's one scene in particular... Have we finished talking about Gollum?
Yeah.
So this is something I alluded to on the previous episodes and something I really wanted to talk about because it's my favorite scene in the whole trilogy. And this is something they cut out of the theatrical version, and it's only in the extended version. And it's a really, really important scene that should never have been cut. It's ridiculous that they cut it. All the other scenes in Return of the King, or the other extended scenes, I understand why they cut them, and it's a loss, but it's not a huge loss. This scene, I don't know what Peter Jackson was thinking cutting this scene. I know he had a lot on his plate. The movie's long enough on its own in the theatrical version, but this scene needed to be in the theatrical version. And it's the Saruman's death scene. So, Gandalf and King Theoden and Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas return from Helm's Deep, the victory at Helm's Deep. They return to Isengard to find Merry and Pippin celebrating
having
the tree.
laid waste to Isengard.
the treant's victory at Isengard. And in the theatrical version, it's a goddamn sin what happens. One of them says, "What about Saruman?" And Gandalf's like, "He has no power anymore. He's safe locked in his tower." Cut to Pippin finds what's the crystal ball called?
Palantir.
The Palantir. Saruman's crystal ball, the Palantir. Pippin finds it in the water, in the flood of Isengard. Gandalf grabs it. Next scene. Crime against cinema. In the extended cut is my favorite scene in the whole trilogy, which is they get to Isengard and
there's a
they're like, "What about Saruman?" And Saruman appears on the top of the tower, the Isengard tower, and he's yelling down at them saying, "You think you won? You have no idea how powerful Sauron is. He's going to crush you." And Grima Wormtongue, who I mentioned last week, played by Brad Dourif, is so good. And he comes up and he's like looking at the devastation and he's crying. And if I remember correctly, Brad Dourif can cry on command because he's just one of those awesome actors. He's in my favorite episode of X-Files, the one where he plays the serial killer who can communicate with Scully's dead father. Beyond the Sea. That's my favorite. Brad Dourif is in my favorite X-Files episode. Anyway, so Brad Dourif plays Wormtongue, and Wormtongue, who helped Saruman, is up there on the tower with him, and he sees the devastation, and he's like crying, and King Theoden is like, Grima, Wormtongue, you were once a man of Rohan, come down, and Saruman is like, talking smack and like throwing fireballs down at Gandalf, who's deflecting him, and it's a really tense. And Theoden's giving this big speech about the men of Middle Earth will rise up, and Saruman's like, no. And then Grima Wormtongue like pulls out a dagger and stabs Saruman in the back, and Legolas shoots Grima with his arrow, and then Saruman falls
and dies,
and like gets spiked on like
it's like the
despawns
water wheel. Yeah, what do you call it? And then he out of his cloak falls the Palantir into the water, and it's a really epic scene and just so well done and so emotionally powerful and epic in terms of its action and it's everything all in one.
In the theatrical version, they're like, "Oh look."
Yeah, it's just like Saruman's fine. He's locked in his bedroom. Just let's move on. Yeah, I like the Palantir. But it's also because Saruman is such a major villain.
Yeah.
For him to just be defeated off screen and then you don't see him again, and it's like, what? And I'm like, you could have cut out any other section. I would have rather they cut out the Oliphant, like the big Oliphant action scene, and left this in.
Because it's a character moment.
Exactly. If Peter Jackson really had to trim down the movie, this is not a scene he should have cut.
Because you can trim action, like you can shorten action sequences, but you shouldn't cut these character moments, especially when they round off a character's arc.
Especially when it's the important payoff to Saruman's arc. And also this is something I alluded to in I think the first episode we did. But we were talking about how Christopher Lee is this veteran actor and, was knowledgeable about Lord of the Rings and was friends with J.R. Tolkien and was a special forces soldier in World War II.
All around crazy badass.
And just a really cool guy. And there's this story which probably many people have heard, but I want to tell it because it ties into this scene, which is my favorite scene, and ties into how awesome and badass Christopher Lee is.
Is it about Christopher Lee telling that's not how it sounds when you kill someone? Yeah.
So there's a scene where Grima Wormtongue stabs Saruman in the back, and Peter Jackson's giving Christopher Lee, who plays Saruman, directions, saying this is how you have to gasp, and then you have to, and then Christopher Lee's like, I killed Nazis in World War II. I know what it sounds like when you stab someone and the breath leaves their body. He's like, just let me do it. And so in the movie, Wormtongue stabs him, and Christopher Lee just goes like, and I was just like, knowing the story behind that, watching the movie, you're like, yeah, he got stabbed. But knowing the story, it's like, oh man, it makes it so much better. And it's my favorite scene in the whole trilogy. And I can't even watch it without watching, obviously, like we said, I'm only going to be watching the extended versions from now on. But it's disappointing that you can't see that important scene otherwise, really.
Yeah, arguably, it's one of the most important scenes.
Yeah. And it leads into the Palantir, which Pippin grabs, and Gandalf's like, don't touch that,
That's dirty.
And of course,
I believe it's a way to communicate directly with Sauron.
Yeah.
Kinda.
And Pippin's like,
and he has like
gaze into it.
What do you call it? Visions of the future or whatever. Before we move on, I completely forgot, and this is the only scene Treebeard's in Return of the King, and like I said, he's my favorite. And last week I talked about finding a
Treebeard. What's in the box.
Yeah.
James bought a mysterious Amazon box into the studio this week.
I almost forgot about it. So it came a couple of days ago.
I'll take a photo for the socials.
Yeah. It's my Treebeard. Can you see it?
Yeah.
We're taking a photo. Dead air.
It looks good though. It's a fairly large.
So it's the Return of the King packaging, and instead of the Two Towers one, and it was brand new and sealed, and it almost killed me, but I had to do it. I had to open it.
Congratulations.
Now I know it's worth. I know it's worth probably a lot more than I paid for it, and it'll be worth more in the future. But I was like, I can't keep it in the box, man. I have to take it out. So I cut it open. It took me a while to get out. It's about 9 or so inches, maybe 10 inches with the leaves and stuff.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really nice, really detailed. Like I said in the last couple of weeks.
Where did you end up finding it?
eBay.
Yeah,
very good.
Someone had one, and yeah, it has arm throwing action. So you
if you have to destroy your Isengard yourself,
and his hands open and close, so you can put a rock in his hand
or a hobbit,
and then throw it.
Or
we can pick up a hobbit. It's really nice, and it's got the kind of glassy eyes.
Yeah,
so it
that's
looks
really cool, man.
Yeah,
may I have a look?
You may look. I know this is great podcasting.
That is very cool.
So
but it's something
But it's just so nice. Like, they don't make toys.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They don't make toys anymore. It's like I remember one time we were having this discussion about Star Wars.
Yeah.
And you were like, "Where have all the toys gone?" I said, "Apps."
Exactly.
Yeah, they're like
and when they do make toys, they're
probably cheap because they know they're not going to sell as many. You know what I mean? Like less cheaper materials. Yeah. Not as interesting functionality.
Yeah, that's really well built too.
And it's got all like the individual the rubber leaves on his head, and he's got his beard. It's just really nice figure.
Yeah.
While we play with this toy for a little bit, we're gonna have a quick ad break. You are back on the Tuesday review, and we've been talking about Lord of the Rings with a focus on Return of the King this week.
Yes.
We were just playing with James's new Treebeard figure in the studio during our sponsorship break. But now we're back onto the topic of Callum wants to start us off with the legacy of men.
Yeah, so not men is in the gender. Men is in the race because Middle Earth, as you all know, is comprised of
humankind.
Quite a few different races, mainly being hobbits, dwarves, and elves and humans
and men. Yeah,
otherwise
men with a capital.
In the books, it's men with a capital, but they're called the Dunedain. It's like the race we're going to be talking about now. So Aragorn, played by Viggo Mortensen, who embodies the character completely.
Oh yes.
So there's a couple of different. Technically, would there be a couple of different races of men?
Yeah, so you have...
Oh, sorry. From what I understood, and I'm not sure, but I always assumed that there was was it the Dunedain?
There's the Dunedain.
Who are like I call them the first men, even though that's Game of Thrones terminology. But it's like, and then descended from them are normal men.
So keep in mind,
because
or is
Aragorn,
it just bloodline you stuff?
Yeah, because Aragorn is directly descended from them, and Isildur, he continues to carry
genes,
that. Yeah. Whereas by the end, by a few hundred years after the movie, they won't exist anymore. Sort of thing.
So the Dunedain, which means men of the West.
Yep.
Were a race of men with a capital M, descended from the Númenóreans who survived the sinking of their island kingdom and came to Eriador, which is the main continent.
Yeah.
So my assumption is that there would have been habitable races in Eriador which were not of the Númenóreans.
Yeah.
Which could be the reason why there's so few Númenóreans left.
Yeah.
They settled in Gondor, which is where Aragorn comes from, and a couple other places. So there's obviously we're not talking experts or historians, so please take what we say more or less with a grain of salt. But the reason that the Númenóreans or Dunedain are special is because they essentially had a closer connection to the gods. So in the Silmarillion, I believe they had like a temple they could communicate directly to like the heavens with. And they were also capable of magical feats, whereas, of course, the humans in the Lord of the Rings movies we see certainly can't.
No.
The only people to use magic are the wizards, the elves.
Elves have,
in a limited capacity, the elves, and technically Aragorn towards the end of the book. He's like, end of the movie, or is that just in the books?
I think that's the book.
He can heal people at the end of the book.
That's the book.
It's referenced in the film, but
this is
shown.
Basically supplementary stuff that's not in the movie.
Yeah, it's just an explanation of the. So Aragorn is the last of these men of the West.
Yeah.
Because of his bloodline.
Yeah.
Because essentially
we learn in Two Towers that he's 87 years old, despite having the appearance
of like a 40
and vitality of like 40 or so. Yeah.
And essentially his return signifies the return of like the noble man to like the high seat of power.
Yeah.
But it also symbolizes the age of man coming.
Yeah.
So there's an idea in the Lord of the Rings movies and the books that like the elves have had their time.
Yeah.
And that time is now coming to an end.
Magic and elves are going out of the world, and the time of men is coming.
Now, I think I'm correct in saying that the Lord of the Rings, while it's fictitious, it's supposed to technically be like a tale from Earth's older history.
That's what I always assumed.
That's what I assumed. That I could be wrong.
Because I always assume when they say the age of men is coming, is what they're alluding to, or potentially what Tolkien was alluding to, was that the present day.
Yeah, a time without magic.
Yeah, we are in the time of men. Like the only race we know of are the human race. We don't have elves, we don't have dwarves and magic. So when he says the time of men, obviously Middle Earth doesn't match, Earth's geography or history.
No.
But
it's like a time. It's like a time before memory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's I always assumed what Tolkien was getting at. And again, this is just an assumption. I'm not an expert. I always assumed what he was getting at is that all our legends and fairy tales and so on come from a real place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all. Of course, it's all fake.
No,
but like the idea is,
the idea was that Middle Earth
existed. He found this text
that
and
Middle
he's
Earth
translating
existed,
it.
And then the Age of Men started, and we forgot because magic went out, but now all
like it's not based off any one group of people. It's just like a completely fictitious prehistory.
Yeah.
Now, so the reason we mention this is because when Aragorn returns to the seat of power, it also signifies the downfall of Sauron and the destruction of the ring. Like that all happens around the same era.
So one of the reasons Sauron is so scared of Aragorn is because if he returns to the throne, the Age of Men begins and the magic goes out of the world, and
of course Sauron himself is essentially a wizard.
Yeah.
The same as Gandalf.
Yeah.
And the
Saruman,
other Blue Astari and so on.
Yeah.
more powerful. But still one of the same. So if magic goes out of the land, that weakens his connection to Middle Earth.
This is why the elves in the previous two movies are leaving and going to the Undying Lands.
Because they sense that their time's coming to a close.
Yeah.
Which, of course, this close occurs in Return of the King.
Yeah.
So when the ring symbolizes magic in like mainly negative magic, but it also we can think of it as symbolizing magic as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? So when Frodo chucks the ring in Mount Doom... That's it. It's all done.
Yeah.
Like the power of the ring's gone. Nobody can pick it up and use it for good or bad.
It's hold over people.
That's right. And then, of course, the elves go to the Grey Havens at the end of the film, which symbolizes them departing the real physical Earth.
Yeah.
Like the Grey Havens technically exists, but you can't reach it by normal human means.
Yeah.
So this arc, this ending... Obviously, it happens in the last film because you can't have a film after the end.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this film so special is that it's resolving these really heavy themes that are explored through the first two films as well.
Yeah.
Because you see elves departing in Fellowship. You hear people talk about it through both of the movies.
Yeah.
And the books as well.
Yeah. You see the elves leaving. Yeah. And it ties in with Arwen and Aragorn's relationship, and she decides to stay, and that ends up almost killing her.
Yeah, and I'm sure over time Aragorn, like the power of the bloodline, would also diminish as well.
Yeah,
it would weaken with every generation.
Yeah. But yeah. So my point is that the arcs are so deep in this trilogy.
Yeah.
That's what like a lot. It won all the awards for a start. Nobody ever thought Return was the weakest of the movies.
No,
but that also
was like a trilogy.
Yeah, it retroactively makes the other two movies stronger.
Yeah,
because there's such satisfying payoff.
Yeah,
whereas you look at, I hate to bring it up, you look at Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because, guys, we didn't particularly like any of the Star Wars the sequel movies, but you look at the payoffs in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. Well, it's the Game of Thrones thing where it's like, it doesn't matter how strong the first few seasons are. If your last seasons suck, the whole thing is going to retroactively be tainted. Yeah. And if Return of the King let everyone down, then the first two movies are great, but it
kind of lets the breath out of it.
Yeah, retroactively ruin the first two.
Like The Expendables.
Well, I mean, those are completely different because you can watch them in any order. You know,
but the third one was the weakest, and it sucks.
Yeah, but that's not really. Yeah, that doesn't really apply. But I mean, Return of the King had almost. I mean, I guess they all have their heavy lifting to do, but Return of the King almost had the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess Fellowship. I mean, they all had.
Yeah, but I was saying before, they all have their task.
Yeah. But yeah, Return of the King, like worked what's
sticking the landing is sometimes the hardest
but it's
part.
like it blew everyone's face off. Like, because you can imagine how excited everyone was when Two Towers came out, and like, the next one's coming out, the last one's coming out. And I remember Return of the King was just the biggest thing of that year.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just incredible.
Well, I mean, also let's talk about the sort of, I guess, the symbolism or allegories in the movie as well, while we're still live. Because, this is I will say a popularly dismissed theory that the movies are somewhat based on his experiences.
Oh, J.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, the author, his experiences in World War I.
Yeah, one.
At the Somme.
Yeah.
And sort of it deals with some issues of, we'll say the terror of war and other things. And more broadly, the movies also deal with, I guess, moving on from a more peaceful type of existence.
Yeah, the hobbits are used to...
And trauma, yeah.
Yeah, because before, pre-World War One, I guess war's always been terrible, but it wasn't as brutal.
Yeah.
It wasn't as big.
It wasn't as big. It wasn't as deadly.
Not as many men would have died.
There were no Gatling guns, no trenches.
Well, that's actually something I want to talk about, how last week we were talking about with Isengard, how Saruman is industrializing his army, and how we were like, oh, it's the man versus nature thing. But I think it definitely ties into the whole mechanized death.
Yeah, because
the industrialized warfare of that World War One brought.
Yeah, and because we have to keep in mind these books were written over 100 years. Well, they weren't written over 100 years ago. His experiences were.
His experience in World War One,
and so like he would have grown up in a time that's very different from.
Yeah, he would have seen urbanization play out in front of his eyes pretty quickly.
There's an argument to be made aside from all the war stuff. A lot of that, the sort of the Treebeard stuff, the Isengard stuff, the modernization. It's an allegory to modernization.
Yeah,
and even magic, magic leaving Middle Earth. It's the same thing. Like back in
Innocence. It's like Innocence leaving.
But also in terms of warfare, like it's the first time. World War One was the first time you had tanks and machine guns and planes, and it's like. It's this, like, I think, Lord of the Rings is like, even though Tolkien probably would deny it, and Tolkien scholars would probably deny it, it definitely, his experiences 100% would have seeped through.
They bled in. I remember we talked about this when we were watching it, and I said, unfortunately, it's not up to him.
Yeah.
In the sense that...
subconsciously this would have had to have played.
Life bleeds into art.
Yeah.
Whether that's movies, books... stage plays, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The way you write a story, that comes from you, and you are just an amalgamation of your memories and experiences.
Yeah.
So it's like, the war, the stuff from the war, of course it made it in.
Yeah.
That scene in the books and the films where they're walking through the swamp and there's dead soldiers.
The dead marshes, yeah. It's got to be no man's land.
The Somme was one of the dirtiest, most horrible parts of the First World War.
Yeah. And the spotlight of the tower.
Exactly. It's all in there, whether he meant it or not.
Yeah. And we were discussing how, like, Frodo is so affected by his experience.
Yeah.
He's got the wound that won't heal.
Yeah,
or
much
that
like soldiers
hurts.
did.
Yeah. And he's never the same. And so at the end, he decides to go with the elf, and Bilbo as well. They decide to go with the elves to the Undying Lands, the Greyhavens. So it's like we had this discussion about PTSD, which back in
they probably didn't know too much
is like, I guess there was shell shock, but they didn't really know
a lot about it,
and it wasn't. It wasn't. And when the books came out though in the 50s, it wasn't treated seriously or it wasn't known a lot about.
They didn't talk about it either. It was one of those things where you didn't talk about
exactly, and that's something I wanted to say is like Tolkien, like Nathan. I think me and you were having this discussion a long time ago off air. Like, there's a generation of people who fought in World War One, World War Two. Horrible things happen. They just don't talk about it. It's just like it's just an agreed upon thing. An unspoken thing, and you just don't talk about.
It's easy for Tolkien to deny.
Yeah, and
why would he want to confront it?
A lot of people who went to war then wrote books, made movies, made songs, whatever. That definitely bled through into the work, and they would deny that it had anything to do.
Especially,
and what we're saying is, it's just subconsciously it has to.
Especially his generation, that stiff upper lip. Kind of mentality.
Yeah.
He wouldn't talk about it, even if it, the closest I can come to is Robert Graves with his memoir, Goodbye to All That. And he talks the terrible things, him and Tolkien, because they were the similar generation, World War One, they saw and did terrible things.
Yeah.
Like horrible, nightmarish things.
Yeah.
And, like rats eating people in the trenches.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So it's like, you want to tell me that doesn't make its way into your world?
Yeah.
When there's a war going on.
Yeah, even if you're making a magical fantasy, fun adventure, there's definitely there's parallels that can't be not denied. Now, of course, it might not always be super intentional, and some things people claim are just way off base. Like, obviously not everything in the movie is about, like, people say the One Ring is the atom bomb. I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not. Tolkien hated metaphor. So that's why I think that he genuinely didn't feel like his experiences bled into the book.
Yeah.
But like we said, some things it's not up to you.
But the fact that Frodo comes back and he's completely changed and things aren't the same
yeah, that's right.
anymore.
He never came back from the war kind
exactly,
of thing.
Yeah. Like, that can't be a coincidence.
The only metaphor that I've read that I like, which I think is completely fake, but I like it anyway, is the elves leaving is like, there's no more innocence in the world. We already know how everything in the world works.
That's what I was going to say, is that I think plays into the war as well. It's like you come back from war and it's like the magic has gone out of
That's right, but it's also like
innocence
it's also like the complete understanding of the world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's like the elves represent mystery and magic,
and it's like now it's the time for science and being an adult.
And that's probably completely fake, but it's one that I think has a grain of truth to it in the sense that elves represent these things.
Tolkien's probably spinning in his grave right now, but we're trying to be respectful of.
No, but like
and
I said,
it's also
that's completely wrong, but I still like it.
Yeah,
but it's a message of the books as a whole as well, because like when the book, when he was a young man, as we said, he would have grown up slightly into major industrialization and stuff like that, right? And like especially with the magics going away, right? Yeah. He would have seen magic in his youth. People still believed in a lot of that sort of those like those myths and those like they believed in fairies and they had traditions, and he would have seen that go.
Yeah.
Whereas as war and modernization and industrialization led to
the radio,
television, there was less time for those traditional magical beliefs, we'll say. And so, like, I think it's a whole big his experiences in war, his experiences growing up from what was probably, if he didn't grow up in the city, a hobbit-like village, possibly, or his parents might have had like a smaller village.
The country towns, at the time would have been very traditional.
Like going to London would have taken a few days. It would have been a trip. Pre 1900. And it's like, I think the whole thing, like that magic's going away, like the industrialization argument, I think you can make that. And the same thing with the
parts of it.
Don't get me wrong. We're wrong.
We're just talking.
We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about. But you have to understand that in all these things, there's also a grain of truth, because that's the way stories are told.
Yeah. And also, at the end of the day, even if it is just a simple magical fantasy adventure, it works on both planes. Like
that's right.
It doesn't negate the one or the other.
I believe there's what we're doing is essentially speculating in a what they call like postmodern idea of truth.
Yeah,
everyone has their own idea of truth and what's real.
We're trying to explain why the curtain's blue. Basically.
Yeah. Now, I do believe that our idea of this postmodern idea of truth has its limits.
Yeah.
But I think that when you're deconstructing a story like Lord of the Rings, like I said, like certain things are baked in.
Yeah.
And you can't, Tolkien can say no, but at the same time, things can represent things and you not be aware of them.
It's also an interesting exercise in taking something from a time that is so different from the time we're living in now. Something from the 50s, taking it now and you're looking at it through a modern lens. It's like last week we talked about with the female characters, representation and so on. It's like we're looking at it at such a different time from a different angle. And it's interesting to look back on things and appreciate them for the time they were made in, and appreciate them when they still work in today's, world. But it's an interesting thing to sort of think of, like, well, how would have this gone differently if it was made now, or like how does this relate to modern times, even though it wasn't specifically written to be about that sort of thing, so it's an interesting exercise, a thought experiment, if you want.
It's just a good discussion too.
Yeah.
Even if we're 100%, we're most likely.
Oh we're way off.
All the preeminent Tolkien scholars would say we're just full of rubbish. We're talking crap.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where all these people who would, so very easily tell us we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, we're not experts. We don't. Also, probably fall into the same group of people who don't like the movies. So that's an interesting thing to talk about. Don't get me wrong, you do lose a lot in the translation.
Yeah.
So, in the movies, for example, people will just start singing. You don't get that in
the books.
You don't get this in the movies.
There's a couple of songs.
They rearrange things.
Oh, can we? Oh, sorry. You mentioned songs. Can we talk about Pippin?
Yes.
Because Pippin, I alluded to this in the last couple of episodes. Pippin goes from the comic relief. Pippin and Merry go from comic relief. Then they have some stuff to do in Two Towers with Treebeard, and then in Return of the King,
the boys go to war.
Exactly. And it's like, Frodo and Sam were in it from the beginning, but it's like now Merry and Pippin are now getting in the real thick of it.
It's interesting because Frodo and Sam's journey to war, it's a lot different.
It's different.
It's like it's more of like man versus nature, whereas they're just trying to survive with unlimited resources, hiding in like a tough landscape.
Their part in the journey is much different.
Yeah, theirs reminds me more of Vietnam, which is of course way before Lord of the Rings. Way after Lord of the Rings. Yeah. But it's like they have like a Vietnam experience.
Yeah.
Whereas Merry and Pippin have a more traditional wartime experience where it's them with equipment fighting bad guys one-on-one.
But yeah, like, because I like how Pippin goes, his journey, and Merry too. But like, I like how Pippin eventually gets to Gondor, and Denethor, the steward of Gondor, who's since the
such a good bad guy.
Yeah, since the bloodline's been broken, and Gondor, which used to be the biggest, most epic kingdom of men, most important, most influential, hasn't had a king for I think hundreds of years.
Yeah,
and is just kind of meandering and surviving. And Denethor, who is the leader, the appointed leader, I guess, and who is Boromir and Faramir's father, is just a real piece of work. And he's very what's the word, when
slimy?
Yeah, but also when you just care about like your own
self-involved,
but also like he just cares about the white city of Gondor, and he's like all those orcs amassing. He's like that's not for us.
Problem.
Yeah.
He has blinders on,
Yeah, and he's kind of like, it's not a big deal. We've got Osgiliath, which is the outer city, which will, if we protect Osgiliath from falling to the orcs, he's like, we'll be fine. And he sends Faramir out there, we're in the second movie where they bring Frodo and Sam. And Pippin goes to Gondor because he picks up the Palantir?
Yeah.
I keep forgetting. The crystal ball,
and he sees it,
and he grabs
sees
it.
the white tree burning.
He's like drawn to it, and he grabs it. And obviously when he grabs it, Sauron can see him and like read his mind or whatever.
He can see a little bit into Sauron.
Yeah. So, and then Gandalf's like, full of a took, what are you doing? And takes it off him, and he's like, I didn't tell Sauron anything, but I did see the white tree of Gondor burning. So it's like, well, they know the orcs are going to attack Gondor.
Or is it a trap?
Yeah, and so Gandalf takes Pippin to Gondor, and Denethor has learned of Boromir's death, and Boromir was his favoritist son, and he doesn't give a crap about Faramir. And Pippin kind of feels bad about this and pledges his allegiance to Denethor, and it's like,
swears an oath of fealty.
Yeah, and he's like, I'll work as your servant. And I really like all this stuff. Like, it's kind of a medieval thing. You kind of swear to become someone's servant, to pay a debt or whatever. And there's like a camaraderie between Pippin and Faramir. And then Denethor is like, tells Faramir to... so Osgiliath falls to the orcs.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool, violent scene with all the orcs killing the guy.
Yeah, also there was more like bloody violence in this one. I think I only really remember seeing one sort of actually red, bloody type. There's
some choice gore in Two Towers, but I think this movie, because there's more battle scenes, it kind of ramps it up. There's also Gothmog, the hideous, deformed orc leader. That's like choice, like really good prosthetic Peter Jackson horror movie, like horrible monster, like so good. Anyway, Osgiliath falls. Faramir goes back to Gondor. Is like, we're screwed. We got to do something. And Denethor's like, you're bloody useless. Boromir wouldn't fail me like this. Go back. And Faramir's like, we can't go back. Like, we'll get slaughtered. And he's like, go back. And then Faramir's like, you wish I died and Boromir lived. And Denethor's like, yes. And I was like, oh, man. And then Faramir goes back to Osgiliath, and all his men get killed, and he almost dies.
Yeah.
And Pippin sings this
really
very sad
dirge.
Yeah, which is... I really like that scene where it's intercut with Faramir's, suicide run. And Pippin's singing to Denethor while he's eating. Like
that's really
eating
gross.
Like an
all
animal.
the
all the close-ups of him.
Old school medieval king type eating.
With his hands.
But also,
like the cherry tomatoes. It
also
symbolizes.
It also symbolizes like the madness consuming him.
Yeah,
he's like eating all this stuff while people are dying. It's a very visceral image.
Yeah. And I like how Faramir comes back, he's wounded, and they think he's dead, so Denethor loses his mind, and the orcs march on Gondor, and he looks out and he sees hundreds of thousands of orcs, and he sees Faramir's dead and Boromir's dead, and he loses his mind, and he tries to burn Faramir on like a funeral pyre.
Yeah,
along with himself.
Yeah, and then Pippin has to fight his way through the city, which is being overrun by orcs, which is cool. Because Gandalf comes to save him, and he's doing this cool stuff with his staff and his sword. And Pippin is scared, but then he ends up, killing some orcs with his sword.
Yeah.
And he runs back to Faramir and pushes him off the pyre as it's burning. And Denethor, who's covered himself in oil to commit suicide, catches fire and like runs out onto dark. It's so cool. And like he runs out off that cliff thing off the edge of the city, and he's like on fire and he's falling, screaming. It's so epic, so well done.
It's like a Shakespearean tragedy in a way.
Yeah, it is. Also, there's that awesome scene where Gandalf is riding back up the steps of Gondor with Pippin on the back of Shadowfax, and the Nazgul Witch King lands on his... I think they're called a Fell Beast. It's one of those dragon things that they ride. And he lands the Fell Beast, and he lights his sword on fire.
Yeah, he just raises it
and it catches on fire. So cool. And he's like, Gandalf, I have magic too. You're doomed. And Gandalf's like, Gah-hee. And then he uses the Witch King uses the magic to destroy Gandalf's staff, right? And it just obliterates it. It's so cool. And then that's when Aragorn, I think, brings the army of the dead. And
someone cuts the Fellbeast's head off, by the way. Don't forget about that.
Oh, we'll talk about that as well. Yeah. But that stuff's really cool. Well, I mean, should we talk about how much time we got? Should we go off air and then come back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. We'll be back in a sec.
You are back on the Tuesday review.
We're back. So we were talking about the battle at the end, or throughout most of the movie. I mean, most of this movie is the war for Middle-earth. Like, the sort of decisive battle against Sauron's dark forces.
The culmination.
He's been amassing them for the first two movies, and now we get to see them in action. And of course, we see how the men only have, Rohan and a few outlying kingdoms. And so King Theoden has to kind of spread his forces out to try to amass reinforcements. And then they camp out on the edge of Mordor, or near Gondor. And they only have a few thousand men, and they won't gain much more. And the orcs are outnumber them.
Endless.
And you've got the eastern armies and all the other dark armies that Sauron has amassed. And so Elrond, Arwen is dying because the magic's going out of the world, and she has decided to stay in the world of men instead of going with the elves to the Undying Lands. And so she's dying, and Elrond brings... She tells him to reforge the sword, right, Elrond?
Yeah.
Yeah, Arwen tells her father Elrond to reforge the Isildur's sword, which I wrote down the names because it was cool, but I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm bad with the names. So the sword was called Narsil, and then they reforge it and it becomes Anduril, which I mean, Tolkien names are the best. Like, everything means something. There's always there's several different names, which different
is smart
origins.
too, because once you reforge it, it's technically
it's a different sword. Yeah,
it's that argument we had when we were talking about WandaVision, where it's the ship argument. It's like it's rebuilt. Is it still the same sword?
Yeah. And Elrond brings it to, which also I think happened in Fellowship in the books, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously Peter Jackson, I think rightly leaves it to the end, where it's like Aragorn has to reclaim his throne, and so Elrond gives him the new sword, and he's like, use this and go into the... Are they called the Dead Mountains, or am I just making that up? But he goes into the mountains, and...
for the Ghost Boys.
Because there's all the Ghost Boys there.
They haven't got enough swords.
Yeah, there was an army of men who pledged their allegiance to Isildur, I think, and then when the time came to fight, they all ran off, and so they were cursed to roam the world forever as Ghost Boys
until
they are the dead men of Dun Harrow.
Yeah, until
they fulfill their oath. Yeah.
And so Aragorn goes into the mountain with Gimli and Legolas, and no one who goes in ever comes out alive. And they go in, and it's super creepy and very Peter Jackson horror movie, great stuff. And the ghosts look amazing.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about off air. It's like it's so good because they're just actors that they just put a transparency CG type effects on.
It's great practical prosthetic makeup effects, and then they use like a CG filter to make them look transparent or ghostly and green and cool.
But they're not CG. It's amazing.
So whereas if they made that movie now, they would all be mocap or all CGI, and it would look terrible. And anyway, they're gonna attack and kill Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, and Aragorn pulls out the sword and is like, "Fulfill your oath, and I'll let you
essentially let you live or let you rest in peace."
And the Ghost Boys are like, "Hell no!" And then like. The cave breaks open, all these skulls come out, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty gnarly. And then they escape the cave, and the king of the ghosts army is like, all right, we'll do it. And so the ghosts board one of Sauron's army, the boats, and
they're like a living, moving mince machine.
Yeah, it's like a swarm of insects.
They just devour everything.
It looks so good, like the battles in this movie. But when the Ghost Boys come, and so they like Gondor is being overrun by orcs. They're almost
it's a lost battle.
Yeah, they have cave trolls and catapults and like all sorts of crazy stuff going on, and Gondor's about to fall. And then at the last moment, the Ghost Boys come off the ship, and like they have this like swarm. It's like a wave of ghosts.
Yeah,
and they just
like they're a liquid. Like they just sort of
they just destroy all of Sauron's army, and it's so cool. And meanwhile on the battlefield you have the Oliphaunts, which are like huge woolly mammoth, even bigger, like King Kong size,
like 50
massive,
feet elephants
with huge tusks, and they're just wrecking all of the armies of men. And then you have that. I mean, I don't know if it's iconic, but I feel like it's that. Like everyone remembers the scene of Legolas climbing up the arrows on the Oliphant, and
very swashbuckling.
He like cuts the reins on the top, so all the guys fall off, and then he like shoots 3 arrows into the Oliphant's head and kills it. It's like the AT-ATs from Star Wars. It's
very similar. It's very similar. Some of the sort of the fighting with the Oliphants is very similar to the
Gimli and Legolas are still playing the counting game where it's like, how many have you killed? And then Gimli's like, that still only counts as 1. But yeah, one thing I want to mention is that, we talked about in the last couple episodes how, there's a lot of CGI in these movies, but they usually only use it when they really have to for big, crazy things. And one of the things, like Return of the King is definitely where they use it the most because it's got the most battles, the most creatures, and so on. And that's where it's like you can start to see it's getting a bit much. But I think it still has so many practical elements and still shot and choreographed so well that it still, I think, works really well, and you don't get that same overuse of CGI you do in a lot of modern movies, where your eyes kind of glaze over and there's just CGI stuff flopping around the screen. And also, I like how the only one who does crazy over-the-top CGI stuff is Legolas, because he's an elf.
Yeah.
So, you know, in Fellowship, he jumps on the cave troll and shoots it in the head. In Two Towers, he slides down the stairs on his shield surfboard.
I also like it because it's always he's a wood elf.
Exactly.
He's less refined and he's a little bit more rough and ready.
Yeah, and in Return of the King, he's like jumping on the elephant. And so I like how, you know, because all the other characters, the dwarves and the men, don't do that. You don't see Aragorn and Gimli like turning into CGI guys and flipping and doing all kinds of stuff. So I like how they just keep it to Legolas, because that makes sense for an elf to be that
nimble, agile.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's going on, and then in the middle of it, so Merry and Éowyn have been forbidden by King Theoden to join the battle. He's like, you know, this is no place for halflings and women. He's like, you guys stay behind. But Éowyn wants to fight, and Merry, again, like we said, like the hobbits come such a long way. Merry wants to fight as well. And so Éowyn does like a Mulan thing and puts on a helmet and pretends to be a soldier and grabs Merry and like, come with me and we'll stick together and we'll fight together. And so they're like fighting orcs, and it's pretty cool.
And we get the cheesy, iconic line.
Yeah, and then the Witch King lands, and there's the Fell Beast grabs King Theoden and his horse and like throws him, and
he gets crushed. And
crushes King Theoden, and then the Fell Beast is gonna eat King Theoden with the Witch King on it, and then Éowyn steps in between them and is like, she cuts off the Fell Beast, or someone else cuts off the head. Who cuts off the head?
I can't remember.
Oh my god!
I don't think it's her.
I'm old. I can't remember 3 days ago.
Yeah. Anyway,
but yeah, someone cuts off the head, and then the Witch King comes down, and he's got that huge like mace weapon on a chain. It's crazy. And
flail.
He's flaying around, and Éowyn grabs a shield, and he hits the shield and it like breaks her arm, and he's like, no man can kill me. Yeah. She's like, I am no man.
She takes and then I am no man.
Yeah, and then Merry like stabs the Witch King in the leg, and he's like, owie, and then that gives Éowyn a chance to stab the Witch King in the
void.
Which he's also got that really cool
black metal
like crown helmet thing. That was so metal.
And he gets stabbed in the face.
In the void face. Yeah.
Now, this scene's always been awesome for me, and it's still awesome. But I was thinking about it. I'm like, they established that Ringwraiths can't be killed by mortal weapons.
That's correct.
And I never even thought twice about it. But apparently in the book, it's a magic sword or something that Éowyn uses. And I thought, I know there's a whole bunch of stuff that Peter Jackson couldn't put in the movies, and that would just take up too much time. But I thought a good way to do it, while still having the same amount of screen time and not having to introduce new elements, is having Merry stab the Witch King, and then him dropping his magic sword, which we've already seen destroy Gandalf's staff, so we know it's powerful.
Yeah.
And then
Éowyn grabs it up, and
then Éowyn grabs the magic sword and then plunges it in, and then that's what kills him. He's killed by his own magic sword. That's the same amount of steps, while still explaining how the Ringwraith is destroyed.
Okay, so this is from a Reddit thread.
Yeah.
And this is from Jaysk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but credit goes to this person. The whole thing about not being able to be killed by man is more of an exaggeration. When Angmar fell and the Witch King got away, Glorfindel, from the books, of course, and I don't think Glorfindel's in the movies. Or,
no. If he is, he's not named.
It's like a Silmarillion kind of character.
Yeah.
Prophesies that he will never be killed by man. This is the same as running away, stealing my phone, and blah, 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 blah. Technically, you can kill him, it's just hard. The reason why the Witch King died in the books is this. Sauron gave the Witch King loads of power. hobbits acquire the ancient Barrow swords in the books.
Yeah, so that's not explained.
Which were made long ago to combat the power of the wraiths. Merry had this stored and stabbed him. Think of it as disrupting a magic shield, and then Eowyn delivers the final blow.
Yeah, so when Merry cuts him, that's what gets rid of his magic, and so Eowyn can.
Yeah, because the hobbits have the special swords in the books, but they don't have them in the movies. In the movies, they kind of gloss over this fact, and there's the insinuation that a face blow is enough to finish him off.
Which, I mean, I guess if you really wanted to... I mean, it's not important. It's not a big deal. But if you really wanted to explain it just within the canon of the movie, without any outside, the fact that she wasn't a man, could have been the thing that broke the magic spell.
If it's a prophecy, it'd be like, no man will kill you. It's like, well, it's a woman that kills him.
It's a hobbit and a woman who kills him.
Not
so
you know what would have been really cool?
Maybe the magic only worked against mortal men and elves.
You know what would have been really cool? If there was a short scene where Aragorn was blessing the swords.
Or Gandalf,
and then you could say, oh, well, it was blessed. And then,
low magic.
Yeah.
I'm saying,
it's not a big deal. It's not a deal. It's just watching, it's still a great scene.
It's like a continuity issue more than anything.
Eowyn finally gets to do something. But it was just one thing I was thinking about. I was like, they could have easily explained it in another way. Yeah. But it's a cool scene. I guess we should, before we run out of time, we should talk about, like, Frodo and Sam's actual,
journey.
Most important journey, which is why this whole... series exists, is to get the ring to Mount Doom and destroy it.
Yeah, and Sam really shows his colors as the real hero of the trilogy.
And Sam's the real hero of these movies. He's the only one who really the whole time keeps his sort of keeps the faith basically. Yeah. And because Gollum is leading Frodo and Sam into Mount Doom, and obviously Gollum wants to kill Frodo and take the ring back for himself. And Sam has known this from the beginning, but Frodo wants to trust Gollum because he pities him and he realizes that's what the ring
and
does.
Gollum have this strange ring bearer bond.
Yeah, it's like that's what the ring corrupts you, and it's like he feels bad for him. He's like, it's not his fault. He's that way, he's an addict.
But he probably also knows that that's what he could become as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Gollum leads Frodo into Shelob's lair, which is a giant spider, which is awesome, and still stands up 20 years later. And so that's a really scary horror movie.
We were talking about this. It's like there's so much just cool shit.
Yeah.
In Lord of the Rings,
like Tolkien is like. I know he didn't invent a lot of this stuff, but he just put all the coolest stuff in.
Yeah, in the book still. Like, this is the coolest stuff. And what do they find in? Oh, and then a giant spider attacks
when you think
them.
of fantasy, you think of all these elements together in this kind of way. You think of Tolkien's version of fantasy. But so the spider's like going to kill him, and he escapes. He uses the light of the star that Galadriel gave him, and he escapes. But then Shelob sticks him with her stinger, paralyzes Frodo, and she wraps him up in a web. And then Sam, the real hero, comes and fends her off with Sting. He grabs Sting, the sword, and he fends her off, and it's awesome. But then the orcs come, take Frodo. They're going to eat him. But then they all start fighting each other, trying to claim his mithril vest.
Yeah.
And so they're all infighting. And then Sam... we should also mention that Frodo is so corrupted by the ring and blinded that he tells Sam to F off.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't trust you anymore. Get out of here. I have to do this on my own.
Yeah.
But Frodo realizes that Gollum is,
means him ill will.
Tricksy and false, to use Gollum's own words. And goes back to save Frodo, saves Frodo from the orcs. They dress up as goblins. They infiltrate Mount Doom. Meanwhile, the Sauron's eye, which is looking over everything, is pinpointed on them, and he's going to find them. But Aragorn and the armies of men decide to ride on Mount Doom, even though they think Frodo's dead.
Yeah.
Because they're like, if he is alive, we got to give him a chance. We got to, you know.
And if he's dead, well.
Yeah, we got to basically just cause a distraction. And if he's dead, we got to just fight tooth and nail until, you know, we can't anymore.
Yeah.
And so they march on the Black Gate, where we get that cool extended version scene, which is in the theatrical with the mouth of Sauron. Who's just like a big cool, CGI mouth guy who's creepy.
Which is cool.
I kind of love...
And then Aragorn just cuts off his head. He's like, I've had enough of this guy.
I kind of love how in Lord of the Rings, how Sauron, you just don't see him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like
I think what's so great about the opening scene of Fellowship is making Sauron just this huge, like, metal guy. Like, he's just this huge, like, spiky guy with a huge mace.
Yeah.
I like how in the Fellowship... He just, I think it's elf warriors or something. He just smacks them and they all go like bowling pins. Like, but then after that, it's like he becomes the eye. Like he's just a magic force who
like a negative energy.
He will come back corporeally
if he gets the
ring. If he gets the ring.
I mean, not to go on a tangent, but what I really like about the Fifth Element is the real villain is Mr. Shadow, that kind of black force that you never see. Like, you just hear him speaking, and it's, like, so creepy. Anyway. And then Aragorn gives that epic speech, and then they all march, and there's a huge battle, and Aragorn is going to get crushed by a troll, and again, they're at the, you know, their last
stand.
Yeah. And then Frodo collapses and, like, says, I can't go anymore, and Sam...
Yeah, I might not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you.
I can carry you, and then carries him. I'm like, yay, Sammy boy. Yeah, and then they get to the lava pit, the fires.
And then Frodo's like, nah.
Frodo's about to throw it in. He's like, nope, it's mine. Well, it's mine. Why shouldn't I?
Yeah, exactly.
His own Bilbo moment.
Yeah, but then Gollum jumps out and like tries to get it off him, but Frodo puts it on, so he goes invisible. And so Gollum jumps on him, and he's like floating around the air like there's no one.
Bites the ring off.
And then he bites the ring off, which is, again, like I feel like if this movie were made now, I think even the early 2000s PG-13 movies were very safe and kid friendly, but I think now it's got even further. Where the further we go along, the more accustomed to violence we are, but the less there seems to be.
Yeah, it would be MA for frightening scenes.
Yeah, like it's very
nothing in particular.
It's very, like just the biting of the finger and the bleeding, like these three movies are super okay for most kids to watch. But also as we've discussed, there's a lot of horror scenes, a lot of gore, and like I said, because it's against mostly orcs and creatures, and because their blood isn't red. It's the senses are like, oh, it's okay, but there are a lot of like human, like, you know,
fatalities.
Exactly, yeah. And so like I feel like if this movie were made today, like the most we'd get is like whatever we get in the Marvel movies, which is a little bit, but not a lot.
Not impactful violence.
Exactly. And it doesn't have that same feel. And
violence still feels very real in these movies.
Yeah, and it's like I said in the early episode where the actual combat, like where they're trying to kill each other with swords, like there's this kind of really...
There's also, it doesn't seem overly choreographed.
Yeah.
It seems like people fight. Like the reason I love the original Star Wars movies...
Exactly.
...is like when...
we had this exact same discussion, I think, in the Fellowship episode, but I said, in the original Star Wars, there's definitely more of a classical fencing style. Yeah. And so there is a sort of choreographed nature to it. But it does feel heavy, and they are trying to kill each other. And in Lord of the Rings, it does have that kind of scrappy nature of like, you know, they're trying to... And the swords are broadswords, and they're heavy, and they're trying to kill each other. Whereas, again, I'm going to repeat myself as I always do, if this movie were made today, more CGI, more flippy floppy, more martial arts fighting, and it would suck. And probably a shaky cam. And
I love, as much as we all love martial arts fighting,
it has a time and it has
there's no room for it in Middle Earth.
Yeah. Like, even Legolas jumping around, like, he never does kung fu.
No, that's right.
You know?
It's just athleticism.
Yeah. But, so Gollum... I guess Gollum technically destroys the ring, if you think about it. Because Gollum falls off the cliff. He almost takes Frodo with him, but I think Sam grabs him.
Yep.
And then Gollum falls in, and then the ring melts into the lava.
Gollum's the real hero.
And then
so that's why they're making the Gollum video game. Is this the new Cobra Kai-esque sort of theory?
Yeah, he was.
No, Gollum's the hero all along.
What, are you gonna?
I'm going to destroy the ring. Smeagol took over at the last minute. And was like, we have to destroy the ring, and they'll have this whole. They'll have this reshot.
What about What about the young Saruman diaries? Young Saruman who's like he wasn't that bad of a guy. Just some bad stuff happened to him.
If it gets bought by Disney, you know what they did with Maleficent? They turned her into a misunderstood.
They'll do that.
It'll be like actually Morgoth wasn't a bad guy all along.
Sauron and Saruman were like buddies in school, and they got bullied, and so they came up with a pact of we'll get back at these guys.
And it's a grey area. Oh no!
But yeah, so here's where we come to the point where I feel like this is it's a running joke, and I guess I don't know what other word to use for it, but it's like the multiple endings, which I've never really had a problem with. I can understand why people make fun of it or whatever, but so we got so Sauron is defeated, the ring is destroyed, and his eye explodes in the tower, and there's a huge shockwave, which is a really cool effect. And then all these armies of darkness are destroyed.
We should say, just for backstory, I don't know if we talked to backstory, just for context. I don't know if we mentioned this in Fellowship or the Two Towers review, what the ring actually does. And this ties into the reason that the shockwave disrupts his armies and his forces.
Yeah.
Is because the ring, essentially, it has, while having Sauron's power in it, it has different effects depending on the race, but it all does similar things, more or less. And it essentially allows you to dominate, or it improves your ability to command.
The explosion of the eye has nothing to do with the power of the ring. It has to do with the essence and spirit of Sauron. His power is focused into that.
Yeah, no. So what happens when the ring's destroyed is the darkness that was a part of his forces.
Yeah.
From the creation of his forces, that was like infecting his forces, gets displaced.
Exactly. And as we discussed, the ring is the symbol for magic in this universe, and if it's destroyed, all the magic
and those forces being bad in bad apparitions of magic, whatever you want to frame it, essentially get affected by its destruction.
Yeah, so Frodo and Sam are like on the edge of Mount Doom, which is now erupting and collapsing. And they're ready to die together, and then it fades to black, and it's like in the cinema I was like, what? I remember watching it going like, what? And then it fades back in, and then the eagles come, it's like Eagle Boys, and then they grab Frodo and Sam and save them, and then I think it fades to black again, and then it fades up, and then Frodo awakens in Rivendell, and that's when all the Fellowship come in.
Yeah,
and they're all like, it's all slow motion. They're hugging and laughing, and people make fun of it. But it's a great scene, and it's a great it's like the weight goes off your shoulders after this whole journey.
You know it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And then Sam comes in, and they
exhaling.
Yeah, they look lovingly at each other, and everyone makes jokes. But it's so cool, and they're like, and they're dancing on the bed, and it's so cool.
It's wholesome.
Yeah, and then I think it fades to black again. I think the fades to black is what people have a problem with, is because it feels like it's ending, and then it starts again.
You think it would have been better with a hard cut?
Oh man, Star Wipe. Or they could have done a Star Wars, just lots of different wipes. Yeah, I mean, you could have done different ways, but it's not really a problem.
It didn't bother me.
And then you have Aragorn's coronation.
Yeah, very epic. Emotional scene.
Aragorn sings in that, which is very Tolkien-esque, which is cool. Arwen comes back, and she's fine now, and she has a vision of her son with Aragorn, and that's why she decides to stay, because she's like, even though he'll die and I'll keep living. Although technically, I think I have to read the books, but they hint that she'll become mortal as well.
They hint that, but I think that's more of an effect of magic leaving the land.
Yeah, true.
I think it's like what was magical will become mundane.
She might also still live longer than him, even if she becomes mortal.
Yeah, I'm sure there's notes somewhere about that, but
yeah.
Yeah.
But and then everyone's happy, and then there's that epic scene of everyone bows to the newly crowned
my friends,
king,
you bow to no one,
and then the hobbits bow. Yeah,
he's like, but come on,
cheese.
So good.
It's the best.
10 out of 10.
It's the best.
And it makes so much sense. Like the whole movie's been about crowning Aragorn. He's the the long forgotten king. He's gonna bring peace back to Middle Earth. But the real heroes were those little,
the hobbits,
unassuming hobbits from the Shire who didn't want to leave the comfort of their own home. Like Bilbo. Bilbo didn't want to leave, and he became the hero of the story. And then they go back to the Shire. Frodo writes his
memoirs,
part of the book. Yeah.
It's just, and I think we made this joke off air. Like all his memoir is
no
ring.
We said that last week. No ring makes Frodo a dull boy. They didn't let me put it on. Yeah, and then that Frodo and Bilbo now is very old because the ring is no longer sustaining. I do like that scene where they're riding in the cart and Bilbo's like, "Do you have that old ring of mine?"
Yeah,
and Frodo's like, "Sorry, Uncle, I lost it." And he's like, "Oh, it's a shame. I would have liked to see that ring again."
Because you just know if he'd told Bilbo that he destroyed it, Bilbo would have tried to kill him.
Yeah, like he would have done that.
Would have had that face again.
Yeah, that face again. But I like the look on Frodo's face. You can see him like screaming internally, but also like it's just like, it's just
it's done now.
Yeah, so and then they go off with the elves, and Sam decides to stay, and he finally marries his crush Rose, and they have kids, and it's a happy ending.
And eventually he leaves to go to Frodo.
In the book,
super weird. Super weird.
Yeah.
But
we talked about this off air. Bros before her.
No, it ties into the war thing as well, though.
No, I think.
I mean, the dealing with PTSD issue.
Yeah, we had the PTSD, but we also had this long discussion in the middle of this episode about Tolkien's his experiences in the war and in life bled into his work, even if he didn't want it to. And I feel like I said last week with the whole brotherhood of war, it's about these men bonding.
Yeah, it's funny because if it didn't, why would Frodo have been so damaged by his experiences that he had to leave?
Yeah.
And same with Sam to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
But yeah, it's interesting that I feel like the whole movie's built around that brotherhood. It's about the fellowship of the ring. The movies capture, I think, that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I think we talked about... We kind of went through the movie from start to finish. I'm sure we missed a whole bunch of stuff. But I want to kind of talk about some things just in general about Lord of the Rings. And this is something I wanted to leave till this part where we have a bit of time left. Callum, do you want to go on a rant about Tom Bombadil?
No,
this is your time.
Well, no. So the only thing I'll say is a lot of the purists.
Should we explain who Tom Bombadil is?
So a lot of purists are upset that a character from the books was not included in the films.
It makes sense tonally for him not to.
It makes so much sense that he was cut
out. As I have joked in the past about being mad, he has no place. There's no place for him in the movies.
Yeah,
Tom Bombadil is a creature. In the books,
he looks like a hobbit, though, doesn't he?
No, more like a man.
Looks like a man with a beard.
Anyway, he has no. There's no explanation for him.
Yeah.
He's older than the universe.
He just appears in the forest, singing songs and prancing around,
and he kind of does his own thing. And he's basically godlike in nature.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose for him existing is there to be unexplainable mystery.
Yeah.
And that's what Tolkien stated. He doesn't like explaining Bombadil because there is no explanation.
Yeah,
there's some things,
even in this world of magic,
there still has to be something that is unknowable.
Which I really like that idea.
Yeah,
I like the story though. I haven't read the book, but I like how it says Tom Bombadil looks at the ring, he plays with it, he's like,
it's a nice ring, it's okay. He puts it on the table. He's like, I don't care.
He's nonplussed.
Yeah, because to him, it's like if you're a god, what is this ring made by an angel? Basically, it's like what.
Yeah.
Anyway, the only fascinating thing about Bombadil is at the very end of the book, after the war, after the war's won, Gandalf's like, "Oh well, I better go talk to Tom Bombadil about this."
Yeah.
And then it's never mentioned again. I thought that's cool because I'm like, I want to know what that conversation looks like.
Yeah. But
does magic leaving the land? How's that going to affect Bombadil?
Yeah, I think mystery and the unknown is what makes life exciting. Oftentimes, when you get the answer, it's never as satisfying as kind of speculating.
That's right. Yeah.
So
he would not have been a good addition to the movies.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have made sense. And And I think this ties into a point I wanted to talk about, and I think I ranted on a long time about last week, how, the adaptation, obviously Peter Jackson had to change a lot of things, add things, take a lot of things away, streamline things, modernize things. And it is the definitive live action Lord of the Rings. I don't think we'll ever get anything close to it ever again.
No.
And we've discussed many a time as to why that is. And like we said, lightning in a bottle, movies like this will never be made in the same way again. Studios would not take the risk. No way. But in saying that, I would like to see a animated adaptation that is almost 1-to-1 to the books.
That'd be great.
Maybe like one season a book.
That'd be great.
And not even like full like episode season. Maybe like, I don't know, 6 episodes. And have it be more a straight adaptation of the books. You maybe using Tolkien's art style, like his own sketches and stuff, or
Ghibli,
using like a Studio Ghibli style, or using, there's a famous artist called Alan Lee who did a lot of illustrations for Tolkien, like who brought his world to life, and who Peter Jackson consulted when making Lord of the Rings. And if you look up Alan Lee's Lord of the Rings artwork, you can see inspiration for the movies, but also it has its own distinct style that's not influenced by anything else. So it'd be really interesting to have an adaptation that's close to the books, has more of the songs, and also has a unique visual style. They can't just do a Netflix cheap anime,
Netflix anime is not even anime anymore, man. It's CG.
Yeah, but even like, I really like the Castlevania Netflix show, but that animation is definitely like on the quick and cheap side, obviously, because animation costs a lot and takes a long time. If they were to do this adaptation, they would have to spend a lot of time. They would have to spend almost as much money as they would have on a live action movie. Yeah. If they were going to do it properly as a really detailed 2D animation. And this is one of the reasons it's never going to happen, and why the live action Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies are so definitive, is because this is just a pipe dream. This is just me going like, I would like another adaptation if it could be done in a unique style closer to the books, but it'll never happen. And that's just another reason, that's just another feather in the cap to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy as to why it's so definitive, because we'll never get anything else close to it.
Look, in all the multiverses that exist and all the parallel realities that exist, we are lucky enough to live in one that has Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings.
Yes, in a world where everything's gone to hell, and
we say this a lot on this show. There's still good media to be entertained.
Yeah, there's a couple of good things. And this is one that hasn't been tainted in the same way that Star Wars has been tainted, because that's the thing, like the Hobbit movies sucked, but at the Lord of the Rings movies, you've got the theatrical versions, story. You've got the extended version.
You know what it is as well? It's like, it doesn't matter so much if the Hobbit movies suck, because they're before the Lord of the Rings movies. So it's not like you're tarnishing the greatness of Lord of the Rings.
But also, it's self-contained anyway to an extent.
And also, as I was saying, like, the theatrical versions and the extended versions of Lord of the Rings are available in DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K.
Yeah.
Multitudes of special features, different releases. You can choose which version you want to watch. Whereas Star Wars, not only has it been tainted by prequel, sequel, spin-offs, and all that meddling with the lore and characters and whatever, but there's also the fact that you just can't watch the theatrical versions. They categorically deny that it even exists.
Except that there was an auction. It was like a charity benefit where they actually reluctantly got one out of storage, and apparently it was one of the most amazing things the audience had ever seen.
Of course it was. But that's what I'm saying, is Lord of the Rings doesn't have that same tainted... Oh, and also on top of that, you have the books. So,
And some really classic video games.
Video games as well, a lot of good video games, so it doesn't have the same baggage. And we'll see after the Amazon Lord of the Rings TV series comes out.
Eastern kingdoms, maybe we will see some Kung Fu wizards.
But we'll see how much that taints the legacy. I'm hoping it's good.
Look, if it's thousands of years ago, again, at least the Lord of the Rings movies are self-contained.
But the thing is, it's set during the Second Age, which we see at the start of Fellowship, where Isildur defeats Sauron. That's in the Second Age. The creation of the rings and Sauron, that's all the Second Age. But it's taking place in the eastern part of Middle Earth, which we don't see in the movies.
Or books.
Yeah. So, yeah, it takes place a long time ago and in a different place, but it's still at a time where things are going down. So they just have to be careful. Yeah. They can get away with...
I think we talked about this on this
we talked about this a while.
About El Jefe.
Jeff Bezos, yeah. but yeah, no,
he just wants to live in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, but we also talked about a long time ago when they announced the Amazon series and it was going to be, like $1 billion or whatever, and we're like, it's too good to be true. If it's $1 billion, that has to be mostly practical, because why else would you spend that amount of money? Like, you could build Rivendell for that. Like, why? So I don't think it's going to live up to the hype. I really hope it does. It has a lot of potential, as we discussed before. They can do so much with it, and doing new characters that we haven't seen before, and that they don't have to stick to what Tolkien wrote. Well, they obviously have to be respectful of the world and not change things, but they can,
they can set up a new story.
Exactly, and so I'm excited, but
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, we'll see. Who knows when it's going to come out? I don't know.
COVID hurt everything, I'm sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's we'll see how that goes, because it could go either way. And as we discussed, a lot of things suck now, and so if they just keep screwing up Lord of the Rings stuff, it's going to be disappointing. But we still have the original trilogy, so we could keep going, but I think we've kind of run the course of the discussion. There are a lot of cool Lord of the Rings video games based on the movies. It would be cool if they could sort of maybe they should re-release them. Definitely, they haven't really re-released them.
Some of them are really hard to find now. Like the PlayStation 2 era games were really cool. If they could get remastered, I'd be really happy with that. The strategy games on PC are really cool.
They were really good. Yeah. They had, what was it? Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of Mordor.
War. They're more recent ones.
They're They're okay.
Made by EA. They're okay, but they suffer from EA.
They're very repetitive.
Some of the online servers got shut down, so it's harder to do certain
I played Shadow of... There was the first one, Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah,
I played and that was good, but it started to get repetitive when you fighting the same orc over and over again. But
I do like Lego Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, the most important.
Why are you laughing?
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
No, that's the most important Lord of the Rings. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, sometimes we always say, like, if they can't make the movie, they should make the video game or the comic book.
Yeah.
It's like, I would like to see the world continued on, but we'll see how the TV series goes. I think I've rambled on enough. The Tuesday Ramble's coming to an end. I really want to rewatch the movies. I'm kind of having withdrawals. I'm having such bad withdrawals that I said, screw it. I'm so busy. I got work. I got movies coming out my ears. I got video games. I got TV shows. I got comic books overflowing. I got novels overflowing in my room. And I was like, screw it. I started reading The Hobbit.
Nice.
I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to read The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and then I'm going to try The Silmarillion. It'll probably take me a couple of years, but I start it now and see how it goes. And I'm really enjoying it. Even though I know how The Hobbit goes, it's a really fun book, easy to read, and I'm enjoying it. And I really want to rewatch the movies. Can't wait for the new special editions with all the special features to come out. I'm going to rewatch it then, rewatch all the special features, and you'll hear me talking about it on every episode. And I probably just won't come on the show for months on end because I'm going to be watching behind the scenes.
Where's James? He's in Middle Earth.
Yeah, Middle Earth.
Deep in Middle Earth. He's made his room look like a
hobbit's little...
The hobbit hole.
A hobbit hole.
Yeah. I'll paint my door green. One more thing, and then we'll end, because I know Callum's about to fall asleep. I am too. And I'm sick of my own voice, but... this is why we do the show, to ramble and ramble on about nerdy pop culture stuff. we talked about there are no good big budget fantasy movies anymore, or there haven't really ever been, except for a few choice things. Lord of the Rings being the big prime example. They are planning to make a Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yes.
Which
they are.
Yes, but also
going to be terrible.
Yeah, but also no.
Is it though?
Yes. It could be amazing, but you know they're not going to take it seriously.
But the problem,
it's going to be full of CGI.
The problem with D&D is that it's so
and it's so
wide,
broad. Yeah,
and
it's so broad.
That 90% of it, it's not really. Yeah. They just buy the license for the Dungeons and Dragons name, and then they just make whatever they want.
Exactly, and it'll be the worst CGI, crappy. I don't want to say Marvel, but they'll definitely try for that humor. They're kind of.
I get what you're saying, but Hugh Grant is the villain.
But that's what I'm saying. Is Hugh Grant's a great dramatic actor, but he's known for his comedy roles.
And Chris Pine, I'm pretty sure Chris Pine's going to be the lead.
Yeah, but see, this is what I'm saying, is this could easily be a Marvel-style kind of jokey, kind of, we're in a fun fantasy world, but everyone kind of makes jokes and does the wink, wink, nudge.
So like D&D?
Yeah, but you... when you
I know what you mean. It's not going to be a proper sword and sorcery adventure film.
Like when you play in D&D, if you're really into it, you get into the lore and you're like, I'm a tiefling and he has this backstory and this, that, and the other. And I feel like the movies is going to be like, it's going to be like Lord of the Rings is going to be an elf, a dwarf, a guy.
Also, there's a chance that, prove me wrong, Hollywood. But there's also a chance that they're not even going to have all the races. There won't be tieflings.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. But that's what I'm saying.
There might be an elf of some description, and then like humans, and then that'll be it. And then they might fight a dragon controlled by a sorcerer.
It's what I'm saying.
Which will be all CG.
Dungeons and Dragons has this whole huge lore and all these things to choose from.
Yeah.
And they're just going to go for the easiest option, and they're going to make it into a kind of... jokey kind of adventure CGI crap fest. And they won't take it seriously. And, audiences will probably love it if it's the jokey thing. But if it was taken seriously, they won't love it because it's not Lord of the Rings and people don't generally like fantasy in terms of mainstream cinema goers. So they're going to play it safe. They're going to make it the kind of Marvel version of, you know what I mean?
No, I do.
So it's not going to be good. But fingers crossed. I hope it's good. But,
we'll see.
Yeah, I don't think so. But we've had enough. I'm gonna go play with my Treebeard action figure, and we'll maybe be back next week. I don't know what we're gonna talk about, but we'll figure something out. Not Lord of the Rings, but I mean maybe
we'll do something fun.
Yeah, I could keep talking about Lord of the Rings, but I think that's enough. All right, thanks everyone. Like, share, and what do you call it? Subscribe. Rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast because that does things, I think.
Yeah.
And follow us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and
download the episode to as many unique devices as you can.
Yeah, download it on. Just go to your friends or your parents or whatever and just download.
Get
our
analytics up. Yeah. We watch the numbers.
Yeah, and rewatch the Lord of the Rings if you haven't. Don't just listen to this episode and go, oh, nostalgia.
Read the book.
It's not nostalgia. It's a great movie, like Star Wars. You can go back to it. And it's amazing.
And these episodes shouldn't have spoiled anything.
Oh, really. If you haven't seen it before...
You can't spoil something that just shines.
Oh, if you haven't seen it before, do yourself a favor. Damn. Yeah.
Like this, listening to this episode does not ruin it.
No, definitely. We don't do it justice.
Yeah.
Our ramblings do not do anything justice, but especially Lord of the Rings.
Alrighty. Adios, cousins.
Adios.